open our Bibles to Ephesians chapter 4. Ephesians chapter 4 is going to be spending our time this morning as we are going to be continuing in our yearly theme of looking at fighting the good fight, of looking this time of equipping ourselves for what you do. But as you guys are turning over there, got our memory verse to say, Genesis 1, verses 1 through 3. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. Genesis 1, verses 1 through 3. It's a powerful, powerful verse for us to remember and to think about. This morning we are talking about the breastplate. We are living right. We are equipping the breastplate of righteousness. Paul says over in Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 14, I want you to tie yourselves up with truth, the belt of truth, and I want you to put on the breastplate of righteousness. Imagine yourself going into war, going into battle without any armor on. That is what it is like to face sin in the world and Satan, without equipping ourselves with righteousness, what should be a valuable thing that is protecting the core part of who we are, our hearts. A friend of mine in the military, I believe it was the Army, told me a story. I asked him, was this about him? He said, well, it's about somebody I know intimately well, probably trying to buck the blame a little bit, or the grief from him for a little bit. He told me the story of this young recruit. It was the middle of the night. All of a sudden, mortars started going off around. Explosions were happening. In his haste to get ready to go into serve, he threw on his helmet, grabbed his gun, ran outside to stand with his unit to fight, to defend the base and go through everything. And as the commanding officer was going around looking at everybody, make sure they're all ready to go out and defend, he looks at that young man and says, "Sir, where is your vest?" In his haste to get out, to fight a fight, to go and help defend his brethren, to defend the base, he had forgotten to fully establish part of a very important part of his armament. He forgot what was most important to protecting his real part of his body, protecting his heart, his vital organs. He had forgotten his vest. He forgot the armor that surrounds him. He left himself exposed. And if his officer had let him go out to fight in that manner, it probably would have cost him his life. And he told me that young recruit never ever forgot that lesson. Where is my vest? Because it matters the most of everything else to protecting oneself. And that's a question for us this morning. Where is our vest? Where is what we are putting on in all things? Because as we work through this text, we're going to see here that in Ephesians chapter 4 that Paul is giving us the practical matters of what righteousness looks like. Honestly, when I was working through this and scratching my head trying to figure it out, I'm glad I decided, let me get some better context, and went through Ephesians again and got to verses 17 through chapter 5 and verse 2 and said, oh, here is the practicality as which Paul is explaining. He spent this whole letter setting up what the armor all looks like, and in this particular text, he is explaining to us what this means, what this looks like, how this righteousness, this breastplate of righteousness we are putting on, should model for us, should be this new life that we have in Christ. That is what is protecting us. That is what is giving us that hope, that shield around our hearts, our organs, just who we are as a whole. It's what helps guide us from falling back into darkness. Now, this is not just simply moral advice. He is urging them to suit up and to equip themselves for real spiritual battle. And this set of really applicable section text, I think, is very important because it's easy for us to maybe forget our armor. It's easy for us to not be maintaining our armor. It's easy for it to become moldy or full of holes or battle-worn. Because we are out fighting and we find those holes and things that pop in. We think we're doing so great in some areas and we might be doing awesome in areas, but we forget about some others. And those holes widen, the defenses lower, and that is when the real problems begin. Now there's something else to be said about this section. that our armor here is modeled after Jesus'. It is not directly his. I say that because there is a lesson or idea that goes around throughout the religious world, again, hinting into Calvinism a bit, of that imputed righteousness. That when God looks at me as being a Christian, all he sees is the righteousness of Jesus. And then, I'm sorry, there's not a verse at all in the Bible that supports that or stands with it. I think when we look through the whole book of Ephesians, we look at what Paul is trying to talk about the armor of God as a whole. What he is saying is that you need to be modeling yourself, modeling this armor after what Jesus has modeled for us. We can look and see the truth that he held on to, that he did speak, that we are speaking like he spoke. We are being righteous as he modeled righteousness. We are equipping ourselves to be ready to go and to serve as he equipped his disciples and himself to go and to serve. We see the model of faith and obedience that he had. That was his shield. How he valued salvation, was trying to bring it to his people, tapping it onto them, making them think constantly about it. And not using his own words for things, but using the sword of the Spirit. Letting the Father speak through him and in him. And letting the law come and explain itself, as Jesus constantly says, you've read, but you're not applying it. Take that imputed righteousness idea and throw it out. Because that's not what's being talked about here in the text in Ephesians 4 or in chapter 6. That our armor is being modeled after his. It's not directly his. And that's important to understand and to know as we go through. Because what we're doing is trying to live it out. And when we put on this breastplate of righteousness that's been modeled after Christ's, and we're living like him, we find that we are armored where it matters most. So the question I want for us to answer and walk through today is simply this. Am I walking into a battlefield dressed for combat, or am I vulnerable from a lack of preparation or awareness? I think that's where Paul gets in Ephesians chapter 4 and the beginning of chapter 5. Are we protected by a life that reflects Jesus? Am I walking ready, or have I found myself vulnerable today? What you see up there is the regular standard Roman soldier's breastplate. It doesn't seem very ostentatious because it's not supposed to be. It seems very simple, very elegant, very practical because that's what it was. And each was meant to fit each person as it was. If you get through and start looking at really fancy designs of their armor, you actually get to see them being molded almost into their actual body shape, to really have true and deep protection. What that breastplate is doing, it's covering up that heart. And the Hebrew thought about when you talk about the heart, it represents the center of will, of emotions, desires, and thoughts. That's where Satan is trying to aim. That's where he's trying to target. The center of who we are for every single thing. He does it through temptation, guilt, discouragement, and shame. And a righteous life that's protected by this armament guards us from those deadly blows, from those darts that he's throwing at us that Paul talks about a little bit back in Ephesians chapter 6. So let's get into the text. We're going to read a little bit sections here and there as we work through. We're going to start from looking at the danger of living without the breastplate. It's always important to look and say, whoa, what is happening? Pick up in verse 17 of Ephesians chapter 4. It says, now this I say and testify in the Lord, that what you must no longer walk as the Gentiles do in the futility of their minds. They are darkened in their understanding, alienated from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them, due to the hardness of heart. They've become callous and have given themselves up to sensuality, greed, and to practice every kind of impurity. This is the very definition of what it means to be living without our breastplate, to be living without our armor, to be living without righteousness. He starts the section off by saying, you must no longer walk as these Gentiles do. He's talking again to a predominantly Gentile city. So he's saying you can't walk as your brethren walk. You can't keep going back and being the old person that you weren't what you once were. In fact, I'll emphasize that a little bit more down in the text as we further dig into it. You must no longer walk as the Gentiles do, because why? What is this lifestyle? He brings it out in the text for us. Verse 17, he says there's a futility of mind. There's a futility of mind that they're so thoughtful, they're so philosophical, they're asking all of these high-level questions. But in doing so, they've forgotten to actually look back down at their own feet and say, what is this doing for me today? How is this changing me? How is this making me a better and different kind of person? One who is acceptable for society, and in the case of a Christian, for the case of God and the case of the Father. Get back down to the things that matter. In fact, it was referenced a few times in class this morning over in Titus 3. Stop thinking about the stupid, foolish things, the things that don't matter. They are futile. They are purposeless. They are matterless. It comes in again in verse 18 and says, they have a darkened understanding. Again, they're asking these questions, but they're not looking for light. They're looking for their own answers of things, and it leads them back to futility. He says there's a hardness of hearts, alienated from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them due to the hardness of their hearts. It's looking around and saying, well, I understand and see the change that's called. I hear this good message that's being preached about Jesus, a Savior, one who's asking for real fundamental change. That's hard. It's not for me. I don't want to do it. It's going to separate me from family, from work, from friends, from my life. So thus, that's just not what I want. There's a shield that's being put around it to say, no. You can do it, but that's not for me. That's a Gentile mindset. I think it's maybe to the real big thing. They've become callous to sin. I remember when I first started learning to play guitar. I didn't do it for long. I did not find as deep an enjoyment as my brother did into it. But I do remember as I was learning to play guitar, my fingers started hurting a lot. And my dad said, that's great, work through it, because you're going to develop those calluses, those hard bits on your fingers so that the pain is not there, so you can keep going and playing through constantly. You work in gardens and deal with implements enough, you start to find calluses on the bottom parts of your knuckles. I still have a few from my old work, heavy days I'm working with my hands. The more that you do these things, the bigger that callus gets and the deeper and stronger it gets. But he ties this idea of being callous in that same idea. The more I'm in sin, the more I let it ruin and run my life, the less I fear guilt about it, the easier it becomes. Maybe the modern psychology of things, the more my dopamine is hit, the more serotonin that is fed through, the joy that it brings, it all leads to callousness, and it needs more and more and more. People like to say, man, those Romans, those Gentiles, those Greeks, they lived a kind of wild life. Glad we're not there today. We're pretty close today. For the past few years, this year was a little bit different for good reasons. But for the past few years, we've had a whole month that was set up to honor a particular kind of sin, right? June was Pride Month. Very fascinating to see this year a lot of companies, peoples choosing not to celebrate that. I found that very interesting. But the fact that modern media seems to celebrate adultery, celebrates divorce, celebrates drunkenness, the ease of lying. The more that it's pushed into media, the things that we're taking in makes us less aware, less vulnerable, or more vulnerable and just more calloused. To the point that we just become absolutely living in sin. They have become callous and have given themselves up to sensuality, greed, to practice every kind of impurity. They are just absolutely knee-deep in it, to the point where they can't see over it. It's just a daily part of who they are. And you cannot be like that. That's what he's telling these brethren. Which bears for me a thought, maybe for application of this section. Have I grown numb to sin? Have I grown numb to my sin, to my problems, to my faults, to my flaws? Does it just become second nature? Do I get comfort from my sin? Am I so numb to it that it's not a big deal to me anymore? Or is it so numb to me that I'm just afraid to bring it out and to talk to people about it? where it's really just not that either big problem or it's so big that it's become absolutely numbing. I'm using other things to numb that sin away so it's not a problem for me anymore. This is what happens when we live our life without God's righteousness. We try to live by our own mindset, our own morals, our own way and path. A heart left unguarded becomes numb, and all spiritual sensitivity is lost. There are areas in our lives that we have grown absolutely numb to sin. Just think about that this afternoon. Reflect on it. Think about it through the week. Are there honestly things that I've grown numb in? What can and should I do to change that? Because that's hard to do in the real application, but it's needed and necessary. Because I can't be loving Jesus as I need to if I'm still living in a numb sin. Just can't. Plain simple fact of truth. Just can't. But from this, we transition into a call to put on a new life. Here's that reference I said of the old and new man section. Pick up in verse 20. He says, after describing what the Gentile lifestyle is like, but that is not the way you learned Christ. Assuming that you've heard about him and were taught in him as the truth is in Jesus, to put off your old self, which belongs to your former manner of life and is corrupt through deceitful desires, and to be renewed in the spirit of your minds, and to put on the new self, created after the likeness of God in true righteousness and holiness. He says, I don't want you to live like the Gentiles live. I'm calling you to something new, to something better. You've put it on once. I want you to hold on to it. He says, this is not the way you've learned Christ. That should be a huge mark for us. And all that I'm doing is this how I learned Christ and see Christ modeled for me. Is this the gospel message? Is this the actual way Jesus lived and talked and behaved? Or am I following a tradition that's been set up in a manner like it? Or I might end up following a false Jesus, a false idea of him. What does the Bible say about Jesus? He's calling us to put on this new life. Because there's truth that is found in Jesus. He says, so first of all, I want you to put off that old self. I want you to get rid of it. It belongs to the former man of your life and is corrupt through deceitful desires. That's Satan that's coming in those deceitful things to say, it's good. All the way back to the garden. It's pleasurable. It's going to give you the things that you need to know, that you need to have. It answers all the questions of life. And God's been holding those things back from you. All the things that you could want and have that are pleasurable, he's holding it back from you. But Paul says there's something greater, and I want you to put off those old things, those old ways, that old mindset. Get it away, get it gone, and I want you to be renewed in your mind. That's a reset of mind. I want you to take all those neural pathways, all the things that are in your head that are wired from the old way, and I want you to go and unplug them all and put them back where they're supposed to go. I remember Dad getting really frustrated at me one time because we had our TV set up in the exact way he wanted it set up. All the wires plugged in where they needed to go, the sound system set up exactly how it needed to go. We got a brand new GameCube. You remember what the GameCube was? A brand new GameCube. And I wanted to get it plugged into that awesome TV and that really cool sound system. So I went back behind it and saw what needed to be plugged in and saw where it was, and it wasn't equaling up. So I started pulling out plugs and getting things all put in, and I kind of made it work myself. And we turned on the TV. It wasn't working properly. So I rewired it how it wasn't supposed to be. He had to go in and fix it all and got everything corrected and eventually put in for me. And that's that renewing of mindset that comes in. The Father comes in and says, I want to put it all back where it needs to go. I want to re-get that sin out and get you back where you need to be. That's this renewing, changing of mind that is together. Because that leads to the new self. It says in the text that was created after the likeness of God in true righteousness and holiness. If I want to know what the breastplate means, it's going back and seeing what the likeness of God was. And it's through the very words that the Son of Man spoke. Here I am, the bridge between man and Father. I come as the Son of Man ready to rule alongside with the Almighty. Kind of butchering up Daniel chapter 7 a little bit and some of the things Jesus says in application to that. But there it is. We are created with purpose and intent to be in the likeness of Him in our true righteousness, our true holiness, and the way that is meant to be our real purpose from the beginning. Which bears to mind. Putting on righteousness is intentional. I choose to be righteous. I don't stumble into righteousness. I don't blindly close my eyes and just happen to walk into doing good deeds. Of being a good person, a godly person, a Christian type of person. I just don't walk into it on accident. There is intent and understanding that goes into it. I can't just drift into it. I choose righteousness. And that's that choosing of the new self, being molded into the likeness of Him. I choose to obey. I choose to have faith. I choose Him in all things, or I need to be. And if I'm not, there needs to be a big, serious stop and reworking, renewing of the mind. And I'll tell you, it's painful and it's hard. It might be costly. But it has to be done. And I say that looking in a mirror of myself too. It has to be done. So do it. Choose righteousness, please. The Father wants it from us. And from these things, now He gives us the real deep application section. What it looks like in life. Pick up again in verse 25. Therefore, having put away falsehood, let each one of you speak the truth with his neighbor. For we are members of one another. Be angry and do not sin. Don't let the sun go down your anger, and give no opportunity to the devil. Let the thief no longer steal, but rather let him labor, doing honest work with his own hands, so that he may have something to share with anyone in need. Let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such as is good for building up, as fits occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear. And do not grieve the Holy Spirit of God, by whom you are sealed for the day of redemption. Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you, along with all malice. But be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another as God in Christ forgave you. Therefore, be imitators of God as beloved children, and walk in love as Christ loved us and gave Himself up for us, a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God. I think the key part for this section is found in verse 1 of chapter 5. I want you to be imitators of God as beloved children. We are imitating God, Father, Son, Spirit, all together as His beloved children. And that is one of the biggest things of reflection in the kids so far that we're getting to see. Theo, in his words of speaking kind of like Alyssa speaks, a little bit of musical inflection, seeing stubbornness arise, but seeing intelligence that is coming through, seeing thoughtfulness, a caring, sharing, loving little boy. One of the first things that Theo did when he got to meet Asher was he Theo pulled out one of his books and put it into Asher's lap and grabbed a book himself and tried to open up and read to Asher. It was a cute, beautiful moment to see here is a child that has seen somewhere in his life selflessness and a want to share and be connected. This is the kind of imitation things that children do. The parents should be modeling, make sure they're modeling. So the greater point here is parents, what are you modeling for the kids? That's a big, deeper thought that comes through as well. But here is Paul's practical and protective explanation of what the breastplate of righteousness looks like in real life. He says, I want you to be speaking truth instead of lies. You've got to be speaking truth instead of lies. And put away falsehood, let each of you speak the truth with his neighbor. For we are members of one another. I'll tell you, there's deep reasons of why we find it easy to lie. Second nature to it. I'm dealing with self-confidence issues. Trying to avoid confrontation, hard conversations. Take the easy way out into things. It's not going to hurt anybody if I can get away with this. Maybe we're trying to be people pleasers and little-eyes the things that we say. Now, there's a level of truth that's not overly hard and critical. You can get to that very easily. What he is saying is this is the kind of honest, loving, compassionate truth together. Once you put away all falsehood, let each of you speak the truth with his neighbor, for we are members of one another. We are a family together. Family should not be hiding things, should not be lying and deceiving one another. Righteousness starts in truth, not in lies and not in deception. And if that's the fundamental foundation of where you're at, you gotta rebuild that foundation. Tear it up with a jackhammer, be real, be honest, and let it go. You're not helping anybody, you're hurting relationships because the truth will always come out. It also says in verse 26 and 27, I need you to be in control of your anger. We have to be in control of our anger. I notice he doesn't say don't be angry. He doesn't say that at all. He says be angry and do not sin. Don't let the sun go down your anger and give no opportunity to the devil. We have to be in control of our anger. And maybe this is an important lesson to this day's culture and time. I'll tell you from all the reels and YouTube shorts and when I was on TikTok at some point, that's the vast majority of things I saw was anger. Anger from either side of aisles, anger from either sides of Christianity, of religion as a whole, any sort of philosophy. You don't agree with me, you're an XYZ kind of thing, and there was malice and anger and contempt and bitterness in those tones from both sides of every argument. Gala of this world could really use a lot more lessons on debate, right? How to actually debate and discuss and have real conversations instead of just shouting matches and pointing fingers and poking at each other for little things. It's easy to let the monster of anger control us. But we can't be like that. Even in the moments Jesus got really angry, he was still in control of himself. He still had a holy mindset. He is flipping tables in the temple courts. It is not because he is doing it out of blind rage. There is righteousness that is behind what he is doing. There is truth that he is speaking out. And it is acknowledged and saw by all. And the authority that went with it was acknowledged and said. Through Jesus' own mouth, this is my Father's house. And you have turned it into a house of thieves, a den of robbers. Christians cannot be representing Christ with anger and characteristics of malice behind who we are. Just can't. We have to protect who we are as Christians by letting the anger not control. Just simply go at times. He also says, I need you to work with integrity. Let the thief no longer steal, but rather let him labor doing honest work with his own hands, that he may have something to share with anyone in need. I have to be known as somebody of integrity, of purpose, of ethics. That's what Christ did. See him working constantly with truth in mind, and everything he does with absolute authority behind with the Father. Again, not with malice, not with grief, not with a braggadocious kind of thing. He's simply explaining what it is. He has constant integrity. It's probably why when the kangaroo court finally happened, they had to find a couple of... Nobody could come up with easy things together. No two people could agree on what to charge him with. Because he had true integrity and honesty with the law in and of itself. He modeled it for us, working with integrity. He also says, I need you to be using your words to build each other up. No corrupting talk come out of your mouth, only as such for building up, as fits the occasion, that may give grace to those who hear. What are my words doing and saying? Am I speaking as Christ spoke? Or am I tearing down as Satan wants to be us tearing down others? What kind of words are being said both on the clickety-clack of the keyboard, from any kind of podium, pulpit of our lives, soapbox that we stand on? What are we doing to build up instead of tear down? What we're forgiving as Christ forgave. Grieve the Spirit of God by whom you were sealed for their redemption. So let all bitterness, wrath, anger, clamor, slander be put away from you along with all this malice. Even all the things that aimed at Jesus in those manners and ways. How easy it can come from us too. What does Jesus say upon the cross? Father, forgive them, they know not what they do. We have to be a different kind of people. We have to be those that are looking and are speaking with kindness, tenderheartedness, forgiving one another as God in Christ forgave. We are a different kind of people. Those who are walking in love. Is my life a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God? So the question of this section for me is, how am I growing and reinforcing my heart? Because that's a big section of text there that could easily spend 30 plus minutes on right there. What am I doing to grow and reinforce myself? I can look through this and say, I'm strong here, I'm weak in a bunch of these things too. So what am I doing to reinforce and build myself up? And if it's not going back to the Word, if it's not spending time with my brother, if it's not going to God in prayer and confessing to one another and being real and open and honest with each other about our problems and faults and flaws, frankly, we're not doing what we need to do. And the holes will keep growing and the problems will still arise. We'll blink and this body will be dissolved. It will be non-existent. We have a lot of people who will be walking around with holy, moldy, deteriorating armor. And the serpent will easily come in and bite through it and poison and ruin us. How am I growing and reinforcing that? As we wrap up, there's an urgency that he gives here in the last bit. There's an urgency that is to be said, but sexual morality and all impurity or covetousness must not even be named among you as is proper among saints. Let there be no filthiness, nor foolish talk, nor crude joking, which are out of place, but instead let there be thanksgiving. For you may be sure of this, that everyone who is sexually immoral and impure, who is covetous, that is an idolater, has no inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and God. Let no one deceive you with empty words. Because of these things, the wrath of God comes upon the sons of disobedience. Therefore, do not become partners with them. Do you see the urgency that is there? But he is telling his people, let no one deceive you with empty words. Listen, be aware, do something about this to make sure you are guarded and ready to stand. There are a lot of empty temptations that will arise that are going to come and challenge us. Sexual morality, it's everywhere. But from personal experience, it brings nothing. It is hollow, it hurts. It tears down, it destroys. It does not make you feel good in the end. Maybe in that brief moment where the dopamine hits and you feel good, but as soon as that goes away, you've got clarity. And your conscience, hopefully it was not too callous and seared, says, what have I done? This is not what was expected of me. Any sort of impurity that doesn't fall into the sexual temptation side of things. This foul language, those bad thoughts, the things that we're bringing into our lives, we just know are not good for us. Why are we letting them deceive us into thinking they're good? Covetousness or greed? Chasing the almighty dollar? It's easy to let those things deceive us and point us in direction because the world says it's what you need, it's what you have to have. There's a lot of stress that comes when those things aren't right there for you. The Lord says, I've got you. These are just empty temptations that he's trying to put in front of you as your stumbling blocks. This foolish and filthy, pointless talk. Empty words. Things that are tearing down. They are out of place. They're there in our mouths instead of things of thanksgiving. Those words are just hollow and pointless. Nobody quotes philosophically or building up things from comedians. Let's just be frank and honest about that. You might hear a preacher occasionally make a joke or reference of maybe Jeff Foxworthy. But he's not going to find himself in philosophy one day. His words aren't going to be spoken as true and right statements. I'm sorry. He's a funny guy, but it's just foolish in the end. It's meant to make us laugh, but it's hollow and it's empty. Don't let it deceive you. Don't let those things come in and change who you are, your fundamental core. It's just hollow and pointless. maybe leading to the greater thing of idolatry. Maybe today we don't have actual physical idols sitting around the people are worshiping. We do in some cultures and some ideals. But anything that is taking my main focus and drive away from my Father and the point and purpose of the gospel of what I am as a Christian supposed to be doing, that is idolatry. And it should have no place in our lives. It is an empty and hollow temptation. It is simply what we've built and put up to worship instead of what really matters. It's just holding us back. Do not be deceived by it. Because these things can pierce the armor. And they will leave the holes. So guard against what can corrupt my character. Because while he said, this is what the Gentiles all do at the very beginning, this is the real things that haunt us still. And these are the things that will corrupt who I'm supposed to be and corrupt my case for Christ. It made me less of a Christian, less of a person that the Father would be honored and proud to have in his kingdom and a part of his family. What am I doing to guard against these kinds of things? Again, thoughtful stuff that has to bring about real change in our lives. Down in verse 8, he brings one more thing. At one time you were in darkness, but now you are the light in the Lord. Walk as children of light. This here is why righteousness matters. Because it reflects our identity. We are children of light. Why are we not walking it? It displays the gospel message. It shows us who we are supposed to be as Christians. This is why righteousness matters. Because it protects us to our core, to our soul. We are light in the Lord. Walk as children of light. This is what is expected of us. Our life is either shielding our heart or exposing it. Righteousness isn't just about avoiding sin. It's about becoming more like Jesus. He's modeled it for us. He's called us to be his people, his disciples, his brethren. So why would I do anything against it? It's not something about avoiding the sin. It's looking and saying, what can I do to be more like the true righteousness that is in Jesus? When we equip the breastplate of righteousness, it means I'm rejecting who I was. Changing my mind. I'm walking in godly character, and I'm becoming consistent and obedient with what he is. If there are any cracks, faults, and flaws that are there, can we do some repairs? Or maybe you're realizing I've never really put it on in the first place. Or I need to put it on for the first time. There's a place to do it right there. It's in the waters. We can easily fill up in that baptistry back. It's following him through death, burial, and resurrection, and baptism for this condition and salvation of our souls. Leading into the grace that comes from the Father, because he gave us a way to really embrace and put on righteousness. Someone need to make a change. If so, let's do so right now as we stand and as we sing.